What's up, your boy Vaughn, another reaction. In today's video, we have They Opt Out of the 2020 Season, Where Are They Now by Scott Fisher. Make sure to come subscribe and let's get into it.
To me, it is still absolutely crazy that the 2020 season is now almost 6 years ago. I
Yeah.
remember back during that summer when we didn't even know if college football would be happening, and then a second phenomenon started up where players began to opt out of the season.
That LSU jersey's hard than a bitch. What the fuck? And that helmet. Boy, I need that.
Whether it's because they were actually scared or to preserve their draft stock, either way, players were opting out of the 2020 college football season and just didn't play. It was definitely a weird time, and for some players it worked out, for some it didn't really do much, and for others it was absolutely tragic. While there were a decent amount of players who opted out, I came up with a list of about 12 different players we're going to talk about who opted out in 2020 and see how it worked out for them. We're going to go through where they are now in 2026, but before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about these 2020 opt-outs 6 years later. Okay, so player number one we're going to talk about is Caleb Farley. He was a big-time player from Virginia Tech at the time. After originally coming out of North Carolina, he ended up with the Hokies from 2017 to 2020 and skipped his final year of eligibility. Farley was actually really solid during his time at Virginia Tech, finishing with 56 tackles, 19 pass deflections, and 6 interceptions in just 2 years of playing. As I said, he opted out of the 2020 season after being a first-team All-Conference member, and it didn't really hurt him. He went with the 22nd overall pick in the first round in 2021 to the Tennessee Titans, but Farley hasn't really done all that much. He played a bit in 2021, 2022, and 2024, but in these 6 years, he's only played in 21 games, finishing with 31 tackles and 1 pass deflection. You could argue that Farley has definitely gone down as a bust, but injuries also seem to be at fault.
At least that nigga got some money. That's a win in his eyes. At least he made it to the fucking NFL, got some millions. He made it, shit.
Here. Speaking of a guy who sort of got burned by opting out, that was definitely Jalen Twyman. Coming out of Woodson High School in Washington, D.C., Jalen was a 3-star recruit in the class of 2017 and would arrive at Pittsburgh with some hype. Ultimately, Twyman was actually really solid during his time at Pitt, and through his first 2 seasons of starting, he had 57 tackles and 11 sacks. That was pretty good for a defensive tackle, and Twyman would decide to opt out of the 2020 season because many projected him to be a first-round pick. Unfortunately, that's not how it would play out for him, as Jalen would then end up falling to the 6th round with pick number 199, where he never really ended up playing. I mean, he did spend time with the Vikings and the Dolphins, but since then sort of went around to the spring football leagues, and that's probably where he's going to end up. He didn't do much, and honestly, he probably should have opted in and got more experience. Man, just going through these names definitely brings me back, and Kennedy Brooks was the biggest name running back to opt out of the 2020 season. Coming out of Mansfield High School in Texas, Kennedy Brooks was the number 15 running back in the class of 2017 and a 4-star recruit. Brooks would arrive at Oklahoma, and man, he was good. He had over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns as a freshman, 1,000 yards as a sophomore in 2019, and then chose to opt out of the 2020 season. Ultimately, it wasn't necessarily because of draft stock, because he did come back in 2021, where he had 1,300 yards and 13 scores. Brooks had nearly 3,000 yards and 31 touchdowns during his career, but it wasn't good enough to get him drafted. He went undrafted in the 2022 draft, getting some time with the Eagles, before then going down and playing in the spring football leagues, where he has been ever since. Honestly, the opt-out seems to be indifferent for him. Another big-time running back who opted out was Kenneth Gainwell. Coming out of Yazoo County High School in Mississippi, Kenneth Gainwell came from a very interesting set of circumstances and was the number 124 athlete in the class of 2018, putting him barely inside the top 2,000 recruits in the country. He's actually recruited by Dan Lanning at Memphis, which is kind of interesting, but Gainwell followed in that pipeline of Memphis running backs, eventually taking over as the starter for them in 2019, finishing with 1,459 yards and 13 touchdowns. Gainwell had redshirted in 2018, so after just 1 year of college football, he rolled the dice by opting out. Ultimately, it would not bite him, as he'd end up being taken in the 5th round with pick number 150 by the Philadelphia Eagles. So far during his NFL career, he's played in pretty much every season, and has finished with 1,700 yards and 17 touchdowns, and is sort of the perfect running back 2 or running back 3 for an NFL team. He's just been pretty solid. LSU had a couple of notable opt-outs, and Kerry Vincent Jr. was one of them. He came out of Port Arthur Memorial High School in Texas and was the number 10 overall corner in the class of 2017. Vincent was hoping to have a good career with LSU, and that's exactly what would end up happening for him. During the 2018 season, he would finish with 6 pass deflections, and in 2019, he had 9 pass deflections. He was being given early round draft consideration, which is why he decided to opt out of the 2020 season. Ultimately, this would end up biting him badly, as he'd fall to the 7th round with pick number 237 by the Denver Broncos, but he would never suit up for them, playing in 2 games with the Eagles in 2021 before falling out of the NFL entirely. He probably should have played. Interestingly enough,
oh my God. Oh, I know that fuck with him. Oh my God. What opted out? That shit fucked up his whole career. Oh my God.
there were a couple of Wake Forest players who had opted out, and one of them was Sage Surratt. His younger brother Chaz was at one point a blue-chip quarterback, and Sage was part of the class of 2017 coming out of the state of North Carolina and was the number 157 receiver in the country and was outside the top 1,000. Sage would end up developing quite well, though, at Wake Forest, as he became the go-to wide receiver for Jamie Newman in 2019, finishing with 66 catches for 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns. Through 2 seasons of college football, Sage had over 107 catches for 1,600 yards and 15 touchdowns, making him a star. Draft stock-wise, though, it probably wasn't that high, but he would still decide to opt out of the 2020 season, where he ended up going undrafted. I'm not necessarily sure why that happened, as he was pretty good, but he got lots of opportunities on different practice squads. Sage began his professional career with Detroit in 2021, then was in the Chargers in 2022, and even the Cardinals in 2024. He ended up winning a championship in the USFL in 2022 as well, and he's a decent professional football player in the spring leagues, but I guess nothing more than that. Another huge name who opted out was Gregory Rousseau. Coming out of high school, he ended up being a 3-star recruit, and he was from the state of Florida. He'd arrive at Miami during the 2018 season and would end up becoming a star for the Canes. During his 2019 season, Gregory had 54 tackles with 15.5 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. He's arguably the top pass rusher in college football and decided to opt out of the 2020 season. Ultimately, this would not really hurt him, as he would fall to pick number 30 in the first round of the Buffalo Bills, where he has spent his entire NFL career so far. In 5 seasons in Buffalo, he has played in 78 games, has 226 tackles, 7 forced fumbles, and a grand total of 32 sacks. Gregory has definitely been really solid, and honestly didn't need that
no Super Bowl though at Buffalo
2020 season after all. Unfortunately for our next player, there is a tragic ending, as Rondale Moore decided to opt out of the 2020 season after his brilliant first 2 years in West Lafayette.
Rest in peace.
The 4-star recruit ended up signing with Purdue in 2018, where he was a freshman All-American, finishing with 114 catches.
And he was an undersized wide receiver too. He was 5'7".
For 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns, and the guy was just insane. He got hurt pretty early on during the 2019 season, and then decided to opt out of the 2020 season. But wait, that didn't end up happening. Rondale Moore then decided to opt back in 2020, where he had 35 catches for about 300 yards without a touchdown. This didn't necessarily hurt or harm him, as he was taken in the 2nd round with pick number 49 by the Arizona Cardinals. Over the next few years in the NFL, he had his moments, playing in 39 games, finishing with 135 catches for 1,200 yards and 3 touchdowns, before then dealing with injuries and bouncing around. And unfortunately,
injuries, bro, that shit ruined his career, and injuries that fucked up his career and his mental. You know what I'm saying?
Unfortunately, he lost his life this past spring, which is extremely tragic, and he's from the state of Indiana, so I was very sad. Honestly, there's not a whole lot to say about Micah Parsons, who was a 5-star recruit who ended up going to Penn State after he was banned to play at Ohio State, and during his first few seasons of
Micah Parsons, what was you doing in them Penn State locker rooms? Ooh, you was touching your teammates. Ooh.
College football, he had 191 tackles, 5 pass deflections, and 6.5 sacks. Parsons opted out of the 2020 season and went with the 12th overall pick in the first round in 2021, where so far during his time in the NFL with 2 different teams, he's played in 77 games, has 297 tackles, 65 sacks.
But I'm gonna keep it about
sacks, and a grand total of 11 forced fumbles. He's one of the best players in the NFL, and opting out in 2020 did nothing to stop that. So next guy we're going to talk about is another quarterback, and that is Jamie Newman. You guys might
Yeah, I don't know who this is.
have remembered him as he was a big name during the 2020 season, as he was going to take over as the starting quarterback at Georgia after a couple of seasons at Wake Forest. Newman was originally a three-star recruit coming out of Graham High School in North Carolina and steadily got better during his career, throwing for nearly 3,000 yards and 26 touchdowns as a passer and nearly 600 yards and 6 touchdowns as a runner. Unfortunately, Jamie Newman got some bad advice as he was told to opt out of the 2020 season instead of actually starting for the Georgia Bulldogs. This would prove to be very costly for
Yeah, who would? Yeah, that's fucked up. Again, you would have got to play in the SEC where you really would have been able to showcase your skills. That's fucked up.
him, as he would end up going undrafted and never made it to the NFL, and nobody ever heard from him again.
Oh my God, that really fucked him up. Wait, who told him to opt out?
Season instead of actually starting. Jamie Newman got some bad advice as he was told to opt out of the 2020 season instead of actually starting for the Georgia Bulldogs. This would prove to be very costly for him as he would end up going undrafted.
Who the fuck told him to opt out? But whoever your homie was, you need to sock that nigga. You need to run a 1 minute feed with him. A 1 minute. Nah, that's a 30-minute feed off the bat.
And never made it to the NFL, and nobody ever heard from him again. He basically had 1.5 years as a starting quarterback at Wake Forest, and really needed that extra season as a starter at Georgia in order to keep a higher profile. Getting into the offensive lineman territory once again, let's talk about Penei Sewell. Coming out of Desert Hills High School in Utah,
He did perfectly fine.
Sewell was one of the top players in the nation, as he came in as a top 60 recruit in the class of 2018 by pretty much every source. The Army All-American ended up spending a couple of seasons at Oregon before he went with the 7th overall pick. But he skipped out on the 2020 season
The top O lineman in the game, one of the best.
as he was seen as such a big-time prospect that he just straight up didn't have to play. After getting drafted by the Lions, he spent his entire career with them.
And actually one of the greatest O lineman prospects we ever seen.
Where he's been a 3-time first-team All-Pro and a 4-time Pro Bowl selection. It had zero effect on his long-term football career, but we missed out on him playing in 2020. And finally, I feel like we had the most infamous opt-out, and that was Ja'Marr Chase. After an incredible 2019 season at LSU, Ja'Marr would just straight up opt out of the season and would not play at all in 2020. He was a 5-star recruit in the class of 2018 from Archbishop Rummel High School, and Ja'Marr was absolutely insane at LSU, as in 2019, he ended up finishing with 84 catches for nearly 1,800 yards and 20 touchdowns. Chase would then get drafted in
Just off that in that national championship game, that nigga was not about to drop at all.
2021 with the 5th overall pick, went to the Bengals, and has been absolutely incredible since then. He has 520 catches, nearly 7,000 yards, and 54 touchdowns, was the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, a 2-time
Yeah, look at the nigga face. What the fuck? Why his eyes look like that?
first-team All-Pro, and a 5-time Pro Bowler. It had no effect on Ja'Marr Chase's long-term career either, but I'm sure Miles Brennan and that weird quarterback room they had in 2020 really could have used Ja'Marr. But yeah, today we talked about some players who opted out of the 2020 season, who they were, and where they ended up a few years later. But what do you guys think? What do you think of these guys who opted out? Who was a player I missed? And what other topics should I cover next? Be sure to let me
Make sure to come subscribe and I'll do series.